Okay, so we're going to walk through a couple things with the companion download this week. But before we get started, I just want to share a few concepts with you. So the first one is context is king. So if you remember in our last video, we went through an exercise of creating a brand voice. And at the end of that, you had a file to download and export that we can use for future content creation. So that whole process was creating basically context for your AI to use. So that's a key thing to remember. Next thing to remember is that think of onboarding AI like onboarding a new employee. And so there are at least 4 levels of context you need to give AI. So AI needs to learn about you, needs to learn about your business, it needs to learn about its role, and then it needs to learn about the specific task you're asking it to do. And all of those things require, guess what? Context. Okay. So that's another important thing to do. We also talked about having a paid account last time. And so this is where this starts to matter because of a couple of things. So the first thing is something called privacy or public training, basically. You don't need to know all the details around it. But here's the deal. If you don't want anything you're uploading into your AI to go out into the ether where it could potentially be retrieved by somebody else using the same AI tool, you need to turn that off. So I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second in ChatGPT, and Claude has a comparable option. So those are for the paid tiers. And one last thing I want to cover with you is what's called a token limit. So fancy words, all it means is that your AI can only handle so much at a time. So if you have ever started a chat conversation and it starts out great and then it gets kind of long and then it completely forgets where you started and what you were trying to do, that's because it's hit the token limit. So that's why we start using context and folders and projects, which is what we're about to talk about today. So all that being said, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to jump in. Okay, so first things first, I promised to show you how to turn off that public model training. So this happens to be in ChatGPT. So I'm going to go down here to my profile and click this, and then go to settings. And under settings, there's an option called data controls. And the label says improve the model for everyone, and you'll see it's turned off. So this label has changed a few times. If it changes again, or you're using Claude and you're not sure what it's called, just ask your AI to tell you what the setting is. But that's the setting you want to turn off so that you're not sending your information out into public training. Okay. So hopefully you have downloaded the file for this week. And we're going to refer to that. A couple of things before we do that, though, is some basic setup. So, if you don't already, you should probably have a folder on your computer or in the cloud or wherever, and you can call it AI. That's what mine happens to be called. And in that folder, you're going to have 2 subfolders, context and prompts. And you don't have to use these terms. You can use something else that makes more sense to you, but this is what I'm going to call it for the purpose of this video. So context is where we're going to store things like the brand voice that we created from the last session and other context files that you have created that you're going to refer to in the future when you're using your AI. The prompts is the second folder, and these are actual prompts that you've created for repeatable work. If you want to store these in a file like this outside of the AI tool, I recommend it. That way you can switch between AI tools because sometimes they'll come out with one or a new feature in one that you want to switch over. Anyways, it's just a best practice, but that's what we're going to do there. So, one folder for all your AI stuff, 2 subfolders, context and prompts. The next thing is starting to use what are called projects in the AI tools themselves. So in ChatGPT, you'll see on the left-hand side, if you scroll down, we've got projects listed. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the plus mark, and we're going to create a new project. We're going to call it content creation. And this is using the brand voice context file that we created last time. So I'll click create project and it's going to add that folder on the left for me here. Similarly in Claude, if I go over here, It's got its own projects on the left-hand side. It's still a little bit different in the display, but I would just hit new project and put that here. So popping back into ChatGPT. So now we have this empty new project. And the first thing that I want to do is give it the context file that we created last time. So I'm going to give it some instructions. I'm going to browse to my context folder, grab my instructions, which this happens to be a .md file, but just a reminder, you can use any format you want. It can be a document, it can be a Google Drive doc, it can be a Word document. I'm going to drag it into my chat, and I've told it that I want it to refer to this for its information. And I'll hit this and go ahead and upload and start the chat. Okay, so you can see here that our project is now ready to be used. If I have done a good job of answering the questions from the personal brand prompts in our last session, and I've got the file uploaded, now the next time I come in here and ask it to create a post, it's going to sound like me. So for example, I can put this prompt in. So I just used an example there, create a LinkedIn post about AI hype, but it's thinking now, and it should be referring to those instructions I gave it. And it's going to look for some clarifying information from me. So what is my main point? There we go. So it wants more detail around what the content should say. Answered a few questions. It's now going to create some content for me. And voila, I've got content that is ready for me to fine tune and paste it into LinkedIn. And then similarly, at this point, if I like that content, I can have it repurpose it for other platforms like Google Business Profile, Facebook, etc. And it will tweak it each time for that platform. So that's it, guys. Once you get organized, this stuff becomes really easy. So again, just to recap, local file folder, AI, or call it what you want. You're going to store your context files in the context folder or whatever you call it. You're going to store your prompts, your reusable prompts, in a folder called prompts or whatever you want to call it. You might like instructions or something else. And then within your AI tool itself, you're going to start using projects. So every time I come back in here, this project will then be ready and it will always have this information. And then if you want to switch tools, it's really easy. You can come over to another tool and repeat the same process. Okay, and that's it. Simple, right? Seems too simple, I know. But the point is that once you get a little organized around this tool, everything becomes much easier going forward. So in our very first video, we went through the process of creating context for a single scenario, meaning you wanted to be able to create content that sounded like you, sounded like your personal brand. In this session today, we did the organizing around how to make that easy and repeatable. And then next week, we're going to continue talking about teaching our AI and onboarding them like a new employee. So we've taught our AI about ourselves. We've taught our AI about you. Next, we're going to start teaching it about our business, and then we'll move into its role and the specific tasks. So looking forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much for your time. See ya and have a good day.